Most people don't fail because they aim too high and miss. They fail because they aim too low and hit, then they call it a life. 85% of working adults say they feel disengaged from their work. And it's not because they're lazy. It's because somewhere along the line they stopped listening to what they were built for and started settling for what looks stable. They got good at saying the right things, at making everything look fine. And bit by bit, they became experts at surviving lives that didn't require their soul. Maybe that's where you are. On the outside, you're composed, you're productive, you're successful. But inside, you're pacing. There's this quiet hum in your chest that never shuts off. A tension you can't name and a question you don't say out loud. Is this it? Carl Jung called this state the domain of the small personality. The self that plays by the rules, stays within its assigned identity, and avoids the chaos of change. It's the version of you built by other people's expectations. The one that knows how to succeed within limits, but not how to expand beyond them. The small personality doesn't scream, it doesn't rebel. It just quietly convinces you that safety is the goal of life. But safety is not peace, safety is not purpose. And comfort, well, comfort can be a slow death. Let's make something clear, that ache you carry. It's not a flaw, it's a signal. In Jungian psychology, there's something deeper than your everyday identity. It's called the self. If your ego is the part of you that manages your image, your roles, your logic, your status, the self is the blueprint buried underneath. The truth of who you are, not who you were told to be, who you are. And the self isn't interested in playing it safe. It doesn't care how impressive you look. It's asking something harder. Are you whole? That's what that ache is. It's not boredom, it's not restlessness. It's the self reminding you, you've gone as far as you can, pretending this is enough. Let me make it personal. There's a man named Ellis. He's 47, 2 kids, good job, good house, good on paper. And yet, every Sunday night, he feels like he's grieving something invisible. He once dreamed of teaching, of writing, of making music. Now, he organizes spreadsheets and counts vacation days. He's not depressed, he's not broken, he's just misaligned. Ellis is living a life he never consciously chose. A life that looks full but feels hollow. A life built from fear, not fire. And maybe you're not far from him, because when the self is silenced long enough, it doesn't explode, it withers. And one day you look in the mirror and realize you've been shrinking for years. But here's the secret no one tells you, that flame inside you. It doesn't go out, it waits. It waits for you to stop calling your numbness gratitude. It waits for you to notice the dream you buried under responsibility. It waits for you to remember that good enough is not the same as alive. You were not made to simply adjust to your surroundings. You were made to grow beyond them. You were not born to stay comfortable. You were born to stretch, to rise, to become. You are not here to maintain a life that doesn't move you. You are here to aim higher. Even if it scares you, even if no one claps for it, even if it means burning down the false self to build something real. This is not the beginning of a breakdown. It's the beginning of a return. The self never left. It's been waiting. And now so are you. We like to say we're afraid of failure. But Carl Jung knew better. What we're truly afraid of is success. Not the kind that wins applause, but the kind that asks us to change. The kind that doesn't let us stay who we've been. Because that kind of success, the success that brings us into wholeness, comes with a cost. The death of the small self. Let's make this real. In Jungian terms, the ego is your surface identity, your job title, your relationships, your habits, your beliefs. It's the voice in your head that says, this is who I am. It's also the voice that says, don't go there, don't risk that, don't outgrow what people recognize you as. But underneath all that noise is the self, and the self doesn't care about who you've been, it cares about who you're becoming. That's where the tension lives between the part of you that wants safety and the part of you that wants to wake up. Jung wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because when you do, you can no longer play small. So what does the ego do when it senses a threat? It activates the trickster. The trickster is that sly internal saboteur that speaks in your own voice. It doesn't shout, it persuades. It tells you to be practical, to be realistic, to be grateful for what you have. It sounds reasonable, but what it's really saying is, don't change, don't outgrow the mask, don't become someone your current world won't recognize. Let me tell you about Leah. She was always told she was responsible, the steady one, the caretaker, the achiever. She got the degree, the job, the family, but deep down she wanted something more, something wild. She used to paint, now she organizes. She used to write poetry, now she files reports. One day her daughter asked, "Mum, what did you want to be when you grew up?" And she couldn't answer because her ego had erased the question. That's what the ego does. It convinces you that dreams are dangerous, that if you pursue what matters, you'll lose what's secure. And maybe you will, but what you'll gain is yourself. Jung believed that the self doesn't just want you to thrive, it wants you to transform. And transformation isn't clean, it's messy, it's scary, it's lonely, but it's sacred. Because in that chaos, something dies. Not your life, but the lie you've been living. That's what makes real success so rare. Not everyone's willing to let the lie die. Most would rather decorate their cage than unlock it. Most would rather succeed in someone else's script than risk writing their own. But if you've made it this far, you're not most people. So let me ask you this. What if the voice that tells you to be grateful and stay put is actually your fear disguised as wisdom? What if your discomfort isn't a signal to stop, but a sign that the life you built no longer fits the person you are becoming? What if you're not stuck? You're just done pretending? Because the ego's greatest fear is not that you'll fail, it's that you'll outgrow it. That you'll stop performing, stop pleasing, stop hiding. That you'll finally say yes to the life that calls you at 2A. I'm the one that doesn't care how polished you look, only how whole you are. So let me leave you with this. You've survived long enough in smallness. You've mastered being less. Now it's time to remember what you were before you forgot. And if you feel the pull, if you feel that stir, that fire, that whisper, it's not your imagination, it's the self. And it's telling you you're not afraid of failing. You're afraid of becoming who you really are. A strange thing happens when you start to rise. The world doesn't always cheer. Sometimes it whispers, don't get ahead of yourself, stay grounded, be realistic. And suddenly it sounds like wisdom to play small, but it's not wisdom, it's fear handed down, disguised as advice. And if you follow it long enough, you wake up in a life that fits you, only if you never stretch. Carl Jung warned us about this. He spoke of the shadow, not just the parts of ourselves we fear, but also the parts we've disowned. Your courage, your ambition, your genius, the dream you laughed off because it made others uncomfortable. That's what Jung called the gold in the shadow, the potential that scares you, not because it's bad, but because it's bigger than anything you were taught to expect from yourself. And most people don't suppress that gold with shame, they suppress it with praise. You're so reliable. You've always been the sensible one. You know how to keep things simple. It doesn't sound like a ceiling, but it is. You don't even know you're trapped, because the trap is made of compliments. That's the shadow of low expectations. The part of your story where you aim for what's achievable, not what's true. Where you succeed and still feel empty. Where you silence the part of you that knows it was meant for more. And if you ignore that knowing, it doesn't disappear. It mutates into restlessness, into anxiety, into Sunday night dread and the unspoken grief of an unlived life. Let me show you what that looks like. A man I once knew, we'll call him James, had a gift for music. As a boy, he composed on his bedroom keyboard. As a man, he led a regional finance department. He played for no one, he never spoke of it. Until one night after his child fell asleep, he sat at the piano and wept. Not from pain, but from memory. He wasn't grieving failure. He was grieving silence. 30 years of hiding a gift that was never meant to be buried. That's the cost of low expectations, not failure, but absence. Jung knew that denying the self leads to a kind of psychic numbness, a slow drift toward meaninglessness. He called it spiritual disorientation. The feeling that you're alive, but you're not fully here. You're functioning, yes, but you're not creating. You're not risking, you're not becoming, because somewhere along the line you made safety your God. And you forgot that the self doesn't want safety, it wants wholeness. And wholeness? It means taking back what you abandoned, even the parts you were punished for. Your intensity, your creativity, your hunger. These weren't flaws, they were signals of who you could have become before the world taught you to play it safe. So what do you do now? You start by seeing the shadow clearly, you name it. The belief that ambition is selfish, that success will make you arrogant, that wanting more is ungrateful. These aren't truths, they're defenses, created to protect the small personality from the risk of becoming more than anyone expected. But you weren't born to meet expectations, you were born to exceed them, to expand beyond the roles you were assigned, to live a life that demands all of you, not just the parts that fit nicely into a resume. Remember Zal, the abandoned child from the Shahnameh, raised by the divine bird Simurgh, taught in secret, exiled from his birthright, until the day came when he had to descend. To re-enter the world that rejected him, to take his place, not because he was accepted, but because he accepted himself. That's what this is about, not achievement, but reclamation. Taking back the part of you that never stopped believing there was more. And if you feel the ache, if you hear the whisper, if you've outgrown the life that once made sense, that's not confusion, that's a signal. You've outgrown your own shadow, and now it's time to step beyond it. So if this is you, if you've been shrinking to stay safe, if you've mastered the art of aiming low, write this in the comments. Say it out loud, burn it into your bones. I'm done playing small. Because you weren't meant to fit in, you were meant to rise. There's a difference between noise and signal, between distraction and destiny. The ego chases noise. The self whispers signal. That quiet restlessness you can't quite explain, that dissatisfaction that seems to haunt even your best days. The feeling that you're almost living your real life, but not quite. That's the self. In Jungian psychology, the self is not your mask, not your name, not your title. It's your core pattern of potential. It holds your blueprint. It knows your path before you do. It's the part of you that never forgets who you really are. And when it calls, it doesn't shout. It aches. It disturbs. It rearranges everything you thought was secure. Some call it burnout. Some call it midlife crisis. Jung would call it a summons, not to reinvent yourself, but to remember. Because the self isn't something you create. It's something you uncover beneath the roles, beneath the survival strategies, beneath the mask. And that process, it's not linear, it's not clean. It often feels like everything is falling apart. But things don't fall apart to punish you. They fall apart to make space. Let me tell you a story. Jorge Luis Borges once wrote a strange little tale called The Circular Ruins. A man dreams of creating a child. He imagines him piece by piece until the child becomes real. But in the final twist, he realizes he himself was dreamed by another. That's the paradox of individuation. You think you're building yourself, but you're actually being built by something deeper, wiser, older than your thoughts. That's the self, dreaming you forward through dissatisfaction, through breakdown, through longing. The question is, will you answer? Not in theory, in action. Answering means turning toward what scares you, saying yes to the project you keep avoiding, having the conversation you've postponed for years, leaving the job that steals your light, or returning to the art you buried beneath adulthood. The self doesn't care about the size of the act, only the direction. And you already know the direction. It's the one that feels both terrifying and true. Jung called this process individuation. The journey toward becoming undivided, whole, true, but wholeness isn't perfection, it's integration. Bringing home every part of you, even the parts you were taught to hide. Your rage, your wildness, your depth, your voice. You're not here to be impressive. You're here to be integrated. And that begins the moment you stop outsourcing your becoming. So here's the invitation. If something inside you is stirring, if a part of you is rising to the surface right now, saying, this is it, this is me. This is what I've been waiting for. Don't silence it. Let it speak, let it burn, let it wake you. And if you feel it, truly feel it, say so. Not for me, for you. Say it in the comments. Say it in your own voice. Say it with your life. I hear the call. I'm ready to become, because you were never meant to coast. You were meant to converge with the self, with your soul, with the path that only you can walk. And the moment you say yes, everything begins. No one teaches you how to grow beyond your life. They teach you how to build it, how to plan it, how to protect it, but not how to outgrow it. And one day you do. You wake up inside the very life you once reached for and realize you've gone as far as you can without becoming someone new. This is the edge. And standing at the edge isn't failure. It's a sign you're about to begin. But here's the paradox Carl Jung uncovered. The self doesn't call you to improve your life. It calls you to risk it, to step beyond what is known and into what is true, to become who you actually are, even if it costs who you've been. And that is not a metaphor, it is a reckoning. Because when the self awakens, it asks for one thing, everything. This is the part of the journey that no one glamorizes, because it's messy, it looks like doubt, it feels like confusion. It smells like smoke because something's burning. And that something is your old identity. Jung called this process nigredo, the blackening, the symbolic death that begins every true transformation. It's the breakdown before the breakthrough, the undoing of the mask before the emergence of the soul. Let me ground this for you. Imagine someone who's climbed the ladder rung by rung, achievement, approval, accomplishment. Then one morning they sit in silence and feel nothing. No excitement, no connection. Just the soft, terrifying sense that they've built a life perfectly misaligned with their essence. That moment. That's not a crisis, it's a threshold, and most turn back. Not because they're weak, but because they mistake the discomfort of growth for the danger of collapse. But what if it's neither? What if it's birth? Becoming is not about changing careers or making dramatic announcements. It's about stepping into alignment where your inner world and outer actions are no longer at war, but there's a cost. You have to give up the version of yourself that made sense to other people. You have to surrender the rewards of playing small. You have to leave behind the comfort of being understood, and that's terrifying. Because success often comes from being who the world wanted you to be. But wholeness comes from being who you are, without permission, without apology. This is the risk of becoming not failure, not loss, but the letting go of false safety for the sake of true selfhood. And if you're there now, if you feel like something is pulling you forward while everything around you pulls you back, you are not broken, you are becoming. And yes, you will grieve. Not just what you leave, but who you were when you believed that was all you deserved. But grief is not the end. It is the sacred fire that purifies what no longer belongs. On the other side of that fire, clarity, integrity, peace. Not the peace that comes from pleasing others, the peace that comes from no longer betraying yourself. So, if you're scared, good. That means you're still alive, still listening, still standing on the edge of something true. Write it if you feel it. I'm afraid, but I'm becoming. Let the world know, let yourself know. Because fear isn't a stop sign, it's a signal. That the small life no longer fits the size of your soul. You were never meant to fit. You were meant to transform. And the self is waiting, not for your perfection, but for your yes. This is the part you've never been shown, not in school, not in society, not even in most stories. The part where you answer the call and walk into a life you've never seen anyone live, not because it's impossible, but because most people turn back before they ever arrive, but not you. You didn't just hear the call, you answered it. You stood in the fire. You let the false self fall away. You traded certainty for truth. And now here you are, not at the end, but at the beginning of everything real. This is what Jung called the emergence of the big personality. Not ego inflated with image, but the full presence of yourself, integrated and alive. No more masks, no more shrinking. No more decorating a cage and calling it peace. Now, you speak without rehearsing, you act without pretending. You move through the world without waiting for permission. And yes, you still fall, yes, you still doubt, but you no longer disappear when fear arrives. Because you know now fear isn't your enemy, it's a gatekeeper. It appears at the doorway of everything meaningful, and you've learned to walk through. This is what it means to live aligned, not perfectly, but honestly. You don't chase your worth, you embody it. You don't seek approval, you radiate clarity. You don't wait for the moment to be right. You make it sacred by showing up as your whole self. And that kind of living, that's revolutionary. Because in a world obsessed with looking right, you've chosen to be real. And when you live like that, you give others permission to do the same. You become a lighthouse. Not because you're loud, but because you're luminous. So let me ask you one last question. What's your moon? Not your goal, not your brand, not your next milestone, your moon. The thing that won't leave you alone. The dream that scares you and makes you feel alive. The vision you've postponed because you thought you weren't ready. You're ready because readiness doesn't mean certainty. It means you're willing to move, even when the path isn't lit, even when your voice shakes, even when your old self begs you to stop. So speak it in the comments, out loud. To yourself, my moon is, and then go get it, not with force, but with truth. Because the bold life isn't about the outcome, it's about the becoming. It's about never again choosing comfort over calling. You didn't come this far to play small again. You didn't walk through fire to sit back in silence. You came to rise, to remember, to become. And now the world doesn't need your perfect performance. It needs your full presence, so burn the script, follow the signal, claim your moon, and leave behind every part of you that believed you weren't enough to reach it. Because you were never afraid of failure. You were afraid of what would happen if you finally succeeded. Now go find out.